is. Well, I guess we'll kick off, and I just wanted to say a huge Collab Writers welcome to Mr. Steve Kaplan, who I think it's fair to say is Hollywood's best comedy writing teacher and much, much more. And tonight we're going to, don't laugh, Steve. And tonight we're going to hear
at least that's what my mother says.
We're going to hear from Steve about his journey and also some tips for comedy and things to do and things not to do, and also to hear about some of the amazing comedy creators that you have helped to develop, and your books, your amazing 2 books. Amazing, The Hidden Tools of Comedy and The Comic Hero's Journey, which everybody should read if they haven't already. So Steve, how did it all begin? Were you born funny, or is this something that developed later on?
Yeah. When I came out of my mother, I said, boy, a funny thing happened to me on the way through the fallopian tubes. No, I was not born funny. But as Ray Romano once said, if he had been hugged once as a child, he'd be an accountant. So I think there are a number of comedians who grew up happy and content with wonderful families. Stephen Colbert, I take it, was one of those. I was not. So I think I gravitated to comedy as a way of getting attention, positive attention. It wasn't always successful. It was rarely successful, but I stuck with it. And when after graduating from uni with a theater degree, a couple of actor friends came to me and suggested, why don't we start a theater in New York? And so I pitched them a theater that was completely devoted to comedy, that we called Manhattan Punchline. And a lot of great people came out of it. David Crane, who did a little thing called Friends, Peter Tolan, Nathan Lane, Oliver Platt. So a great bunch of people, writers and actors, emerged from that theater. And that's how it started.
Wow. And what exactly did the theatre do? So did you sort of give them coaching and then give them the stage? How did it work?
Well, actually, I was artistic director and producer. I directed a bunch of things. We had a sketch group, an in-house sketch group. We had an in-house improv group that was headed by Michael Patrick King, who went on to do Sex and the City and Two Broke Girls. But we basically, we had Fool's Night, in which we introduced to New York Rita Rudner and Nathan Lane, who started out in a duo as a sketch comedian. But we basically did plays. We did Shakespeare, Comedy of Errors. We did original plays. We did what became a very popular one-act festival, in which we premiered the beginning work of David Ives, who went on to do a number of things, including Sure Thing, a number of short, really great short plays. Yeah. And while I was doing that, I was teaching an improv class, and that's where these books came from, because I was teaching this improv class. And while I was teaching the class, I was kind of taken with the befuddling idea that something that we did on Thursday night before a group of 100 paid audiences was very funny, and they laughed and laughed and laughed. And then on Sunday night, there was no laughter. And the actors would come off stage and say, "What a terrible audience." But I was in the audience because, it was a not-for-profit theater. I was always there, like Elliot's always there.
Yeah.
And I wasn't terrible. I might not have laughed at the jokes because I had heard them 20 times, but I was perfectly willing to be entertained, but I would notice something on those evenings that was different. And so I started to explore, what are those things, those unknown things that actors are doing unconsciously that was affecting negatively the performance. And so out of that came a 40-week masterclass in approach to comic acting. And then when I came to Los Angeles, a guy who had been working with Robert McKee suggested, why don't you do this for writers? So what do I know? So we started to do it for writers. And at first I thought, okay, everybody, if you're a professional comedy writer, you know this stuff. But what happened was I would do these workshops and professionals would come up and say, I kind of knew that, but I never had syntax for it, or I had an idea that this was working, but you put it into words. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'm onto something. And out of those workshops came the books. And then the second book, because people would say, well, how do you apply these tools, these what we call the hidden tools of comedy, how do you apply them to a script? And I thought, that's a really good question. So one of my friends is Chris Vogler, who wrote the writer's journey, which is based on the hero with the 1,000 faces.
Yep.
And so I stole his title, and I called it The Comic Hero's Journey. And that book was focused on, okay, what's similar in story structure between a dramatic piece and a comic piece, and what's different. And now I'm working, and this is very, very slowly working on a third book addressing comedy for television, shorter form comedy.
Excellent. That sounds really good. So you mentioned you sort of addressing what Campbell and Vogler had done, but in a comic sense. Can you just talk us through very briefly how the comic heroine's journey actually is different? How does it actually work in a nutshell?
Well, let's start off with a basic premise. And the basic premise is that there's a difference between funny and comedy. That's the basic premise, because funny is whatever makes you laugh. If you're laughing at it, to you, it's funny. But by definition, other people will not find it funny. So when you're doing a performance, when you're directing a play or a movie, when you're writing a script, are you chasing jokes? If you chase a joke, by definition, a certain percentage will find it funny and a certain percentage will not. But what's universal in comedy is the plight of a less than perfect human being struggling against insurmountable odds without many of the required tools with which to win, yet never giving up hope. That paradigm is the story of every comic narrative. A less than perfect person struggling against insurmountable odds. Maybe it's asking a girl out for a date, or maybe it's the fact that they're waking up the same day over and over again, without many of the required skills and tools with which to win. Not without any tools, because now you're talking about a bad Adam Sandler movie. Although now he's making really good movies.
Yeah.
Maybe Deuce Bigelow, American Gigolo, if you want to think of a not good movie. You're looking at a situation in which you're telling a universal story. You're telling the truth, because comedy tells the truth, and specifically comedy tells the truth about people. So let's go to a dramatic narrative like the hero's journey. So what's the perfect hero's journey movie? Star Wars, right? So in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker has greatness within, only he doesn't know it. He has a single goal. He wants to fight. He wants to be a pilot and fight for the rebellion. Through the course of the action, he discovers the greatness within. and he gets his goal. He fights for the rebellion and he becomes a pilot. Hero's journey, and he comes back with the elixir. In a comic hero's journey, your protagonist is as far from having greatness within as is humanly possible. Your protagonist in a comic hero's journey is broken or flawed or has a hole in them in some way. And so where the hero's journey is, the hero is going to go out and heal the world. In the comic hero's journey, the protagonist goes out and with any luck heals himself. So that whether it's Groundhog Day or Bridesmaids, you start off with protagonists who are broken or deficient. And the important thing is they cannot know it. If your character is aware of how broken they are, that's a drama. And in fact, those moments of self-reflection and revelation are the dramatic moments in a comedy. Those moments where the protagonist goes, God, I lost the girl, or maybe I shouldn't be such a jerk. Those are the dramatic moments. But in a comedy, your character cannot know how really fucked they are. In Brides, and Patrick will take your question in a second. In Bridesmaids, if she knew how desperately wrong she was in the beginning, she wouldn't be in bed with John Hamm having to climb over the gate to get out because he doesn't want her sleeping over. But because she doesn't know, and not knowing is one of the basic tools in the hidden tools of comedy, she debases herself to comic effect. Because Bill Murray doesn't know what a jerk he is, he spends the first part of eternity being a jerk until he realizes it's pointless, and then he kills himself over and over again before he realizes maybe I should do something better with my life. So the beginning part of the comic hero's journey is your character is flawed. They're usually unattached, or their attachments are imperfect or have problems in themselves. In other words, sometimes I'll read a script and a guy has a happy home life. I'm thinking, okay, but I don't know a lot of comedy movies in which your character has a happy home life and nothing needs to be fixed. You know, if you want to think of a relationship movie, it's like Date Night with Tina Fey and Steve Carell, in which their marriage has hit the rocks, it's stale, and they need to do something to fix it. So that's the start of it. And the second part of it, or another part of it, is that in the comic hero's journey, you have a big what the fuck moment. WTF. Something impossible or improbable happens. A guy wakes up and it's the same day all day. Could that ever happen? No. But if it did happen, what would happen then? And you have to develop that premise based on character and theme. Meaning, rather than thinking about what's the funniest thing he can do right now, which is why the Farrelly brothers' Three Stooges movie doesn't work, because whereas they did, I love, There's Something About Mary, there they just thought, what's the funniest thing we could have them do? And that's hard to sustain. So your characters, you develop your characters through, you develop your structure through character or theme, like what's the movie about? Now, a lot of people can write a draft and really not know what the movie's about. They know what the premise is, but they don't really know what the movie's about. They could write 3 drafts, but eventually somebody's going to ask them, what is this movie about? And they're not asking you what the plot is. They're asking, what's the important meaning, universal truth that's guiding you? Because, if you have enough bandwidth, you can have 3 billion characters in your screenplay. Why not? The first draft of Godfather was 400 pages. Why not? But if you apply, what am I talking about, theme to the screenplay that helps you make choices. For instance, one of my favorite films is Groundhog Day, so I talk about it a lot. And if you don't like Groundhog Day, I forgive you. You're still a nice person. But I disagree with you. And if you've never seen Groundhog Day, wow, what a treat. You get to see Groundhog Day. But in Groundhog Day, you could argue that the theme is, how can you be a good person in the world? How can you be a mensch in the world? And mensch is, by those who aren't Jewish, mensch is a Yiddish word that means mensch. It means a man. It means a nice person. So that's the theme, and everything that happens there is helping to guide him towards being a better person. In one of the original drafts of Groundhog Day that Harold Ramis and Danny Rubin did, there's a character of Stephanie, because the studio wanted them to put in the reason why this is happening. So they invented this character of Stephanie, an ex-girlfriend at the TV station that he does the weather reports at. And she's into crystals and Ouija boards, and he dumps her in a kind of a jerky way, the way Bill Murray can do. And she puts a curse on him. Why not? We've seen movies like that. But the problem is, how does that fit with the theme? How can you be a better man in the world? Because it kind of diminishes the theme. Now, in order to get rid of the curse, you got to go back to Stephanie. It becomes, how can you be a better boyfriend? So theme helps to guide your choices, character and theme, rather than thinking, what's the funniest thing I can do? What would these characters, given who they are, what would they actually do given these circumstances?
That's really, really helpful. And have you, I mean, presumably you've, analyzed many movies and, looked at how the various steps that you've come up with have translated and how they've worked. And I guess there's, Groundhog Day being one example. So presumably that's set out in your books for people to. We reference many movies. Yeah. And listen, if a movie's really great, it's unique. It doesn't follow a cookie cutter formula, but many movies have the same moments. For instance, there's the moment of connection where even in a comedy, it's important to have characters connect with other characters. I mean, if you start your movie with your main character fairly isolated, like Steve Carell in 40-Year-Old Virgin, he doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have any relationships. He stays away from women. The only relationship he has is the older couple that he watches Survivor with, and that's it. But over the course of the movie, he has these conversations, connections with people who he never did. And I think that's something that's misunderstood in many comic narratives, that those moments are as important as the big moment where the guy masturbates and then he can't find it and it's on his ear, like in There's Something About Mary. Those are great moments. You want to put them in your trailer, but what really makes a great comedy great is the moments where the character can start to create the dysfunctional alternative family that he lacks in the beginning of the movie. That's really helpful. Yeah. You mentioned something about Mary, which was, when I was sort of.
Well, Patrick had a question. Patrick had his hand up.
Go ahead, Patrick.
So what was your question, Patrick? When I do workshops, I'm the anti-McKee. McKee famously will throw you out of the room if you interrupt him and ask a question, because I guess the whole thing is scripted in his head. I like questions because they teach me as much as they teach you. So Patrick, what's your question? Interrupt, please.
Steve, I didn't mean to cross any boundaries. So thank you very much for accepting my question. I was going to ask whether you could talk a little bit about farce. I was thinking earlier on about the Coen brothers films and how, for me, they're not comedies, but they are farcical. They are farcical works in some things like Burn After Reading. There's a farcical element to it, and I do find myself laughing within their work.
I'm not a big fan of Burn After Reading. I love the
Fargo or No Country for Old Men or whatever.
Yeah, well, always funny with the that cattle killer.
Right.
What's not to like? But farce is a difficult genre, because in farce you're basically creating a nuclear event. You're have you ever seen that model, that model of a nuclear explosion in which one ping pong ball hits another ping pong ball and the whole thing explodes? That's what farce is. Farce is a confluence of intense drives that are all meeting at the same place, that create vectors and forces that explode. Those are difficult things to pull off. I can think of a number of farces that don't kind of work. I mean, I don't think Burn After Reading is terrible, but if you've ever seen a Feydeau play, those are brilliant farces, because you can see in Act One all these forces moving without realizing it towards each other, and then how they impact each other and explode into chaos. So farce is a system that generates and creates chaos, but artistic chaos. And at the core of every good farce has got to be a human being in peril,
right?
Human being in trouble, because it can't just be the noise. It's got to be a story about somebody who is trying to accomplish something, whether it's something for good or something for ill, and what is the terrible consequences of trying to get what you want. You know what a good farce is? Election. Election with what's his name? He's married to Sarah Jessica Parker. He was in the
Matthew Broderick.
Matthew Broderick. Thank you, Randall. In which all he wants, he's kind of in this little bit of a loveless marriage, and some woman comes on to him, and all he wants is to have a little fun on the side. But that also, kind of connects or intersects with his desire to not have Tracy Flick win the election, which intersects with this bee that stings him, and it just spirals into madness. But what grounds it is you feel sorry for the poor dope. And by feeling sorry for the poor dope, you identify his problems with yourself. Sure, you haven't been bitten by a bee while you're trying to screw your neighbor's wife and cheat on your wife, but we've done something similar, something metaphorically similar. So I think what comedy does in general, whether it's farce or not, is rather than thinking comedy's about making fun of somebody else, comedy's about identifying with somebody who's being made fun of. The person in your narrative is a human being, so are you. So you have that in common. And so the best comedies have us identify, which doesn't mean that we have to like the characters, but we have to relate to them. Does that get anywhere close to answering your question, Patrick?
A brilliant answer. Thank you very much, Steve.
Great.
Thank you.
And Steve, while we're on questions, there's a couple that have come in the chat so far. One of them is from Patron. And Patron says that they wrote a movie and they had a script consultant review it. And the consultant said that the movie should be focused on the external goal. They didn't understand comic growth.
Excuse me, I have to hit my head a couple of times. No, that is so wrong. And I'll tell you why it's wrong. Patron, where are you? Oh, there, Patron. You're looking good, Patron. You're a little dark, but good. The reason it's wrong is because in many movies, not every movie, but in many comic narratives, your character has a discovered goal. They start the movie off with their goal is selfish and short-sighted. What is the woman in Bridesmaids? What does she want in the beginning of her movie? All she wants is to sleep over at John Hamm's. That's it, and maybe figure out what to do with her life now that her little bakery shop is closed. But she gets a different goal. She has a discovered goal later on. What is Bill Murray's goal in the beginning of Groundhog Day? Simply to get a job as a weatherman at another station. He has no interest in self-improvement. He has no interest in having a long-term relationship. Those are all discovered goals. So that the focus on an external goal is almost by definition a dramatic arc. I'm in this tower and the terrorists are taking over. I've got to save my family and get rid of the terrorists. That's Die Hard. But many comedies, if your character had a goal that was worth pursuing in the beginning, they wouldn't be a comic character because they'd be a fully actualized human being. Most of our characters are flawed, they're broken, they're fucked. And they have to go through the experience of that premise, whatever impossible or improbable thing happens to push them on their journey. And as they get pushed on their journey, they become a different person, they transform, and therefore, because they're transformed, they become, they fixated on different goal, on what we call the discovered goal. So Patron, no. I'm sorry that your script consultant was so wrong. So wrong. You talk to me later, because besides writing books and giving workshops, that's what I do.
Oh, thank you, Steve. That's really helpful. And Swati has a question too, which is a really interesting one, about how to write comedy that stretches across different cultures, because obviously different cultures find different things funny. So do you have any advice on that? Swati, feel free to chip in.
Swati, I'm sorry. Only stories about New York Jews are funny. I mean, everybody knows that. No. Okay. Have you seen Miss Marvel yet? And the reason I mention that is because it takes me to a culture that I knew almost nothing about. And it finds the humor in the specific. The more specific you can bring me into a culture I know nothing about, the more universal it is. Monsoon Wedding. Who knew? Who knew that that's what people have to do? And yet in Monsoon Wedding, there's the schlubby guy who wants the girl, he doesn't know how to ask her. How universal is that? So and I can think of every comedy set in Northern Ireland, that you make comedy universal by making it specific to who you are and where you come from, and then understanding that we all have mothers and fathers. Many of us have sisters and brothers. Some of us have kids. And those relationships are universal, and our fears and our wants and our desires and our foibles are universal. So if you put your universal character in a specific locale, I'm going to go, oh, well, that's interesting. I mean, that's basically every television sitcom. Have I ever worked in a taxi company? Actually, yes, I have. I was one of the world's worst taxi drivers in New York. Have I ever been in a bar in Boston? No. But those universal characters in that specific situation says something to me. So it doesn't all have to be Seinfeld.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, that's a great answer.
Are you writing comedy, Swati?
Yeah, I've always loved comedy, and I keep fiddling with the idea. Should.
Yeah.
My first short film was comedy, so might as well.
Actually, speaking of that, I mean, Steve, how do you, what do you think about collaboration on comedy writing? Do you think that's really important so that you get different views?
Well, I think at some point in the process, you've got to let another human being, hear it or read it. So yeah, I think writing in a team is very good, because if you can make at least one other human being laugh, that's something. That's at least some test marketing. But I think that in some way you're always collaborating with an audience, so that at some part of the process, even if you write in a garret and you closet yourself for 6 months until you emerge with your masterpiece, at some point you've got to have other human beings hear it. So I suggest two things to writers all the time. The first thing I suggest is take an improv class, because even if you have no interest in performing, right, Randall? Even if you have no interest in performing, comedy is an actor-centric art. It's about human beings, and the human beings are performed by actors, so that you have to experience, even if you have no interest in being on SNL, you have to experience what it's like to hear something within a character's ears, to see something through a character's eyes, to act through a character's physical body. So an improv class is invaluable. The second thing that's invaluable is setting up readings. Now, during COVID, that was tough. And I kind of sat in on some Zoom readings, and they were worse than kissing your sister. It was like kissing your sister through a glass pane. But if, hopefully people are vaxxed and boosted again. But you want to get human beings in a room. You want to get at least, half the human beings, you give them their script, and you make sure that you underline what the stage directions you want read are. And you have somebody who is dedicated to just read the stage directions, so that you make it a reading that you can follow, as opposed to, and we've all been to these kind of readings where by page 35, if I have to hear another lengthy stage direction, I'm going to shoot myself. You want to make it easy for the audience to follow the story. And then you want the other half of the human beings, you want to give them wine and cheese. And if you're like me, more wine. And you just want to hear what, and then make sure you record the session. Because if you're like most writers, at a certain point when things aren't going well, you will go into a coma, and you will no longer understand or you will no longer be able to remember what worked well and what didn't work well. So you want to record it. And then you want to hear the recording and hear what got the audience's interest and what lost them, without making excuses. You don't want to get into the head, well, this actor, he stumbled and fumbled my best joke, or it was hot in there. Because what my experience is, as someone who ran a theater company that almost without fail held readings of almost everything we were thinking about doing, And by readings, I don't mean rehearsed, directed readings. I mean, here, you read this part, this part, this part, this part, and everybody else listen. And my experience was that if the writing on the page was alive, it would come out, it would emerge. And if the writing on the page was dead, that would emerge too. And you have to take responsibility for both. Take responsibility for both. That's how we found Peter Tolan. We just took one of his scripts. My only skill was having read this piece, I thought I tried to get readers who brought out some of the same qualities that I saw in the characters. So if I had a character who was, you know, cocky and conceited, I wouldn't give it to the shyest person in the group. I would try to find, I'd give, oh, you're kind of full of yourself, you could read this part. And so, but other than that, one skill of at least casting it right. No direction, no guidance, just you read the stage directions, you read these parts, and if the script was alive, you would hear it. Maybe not every nuance because it was a cold reading, but you would still hear it. So those are the two things. And in terms of collaboration, that's what you're looking for. You're looking to get some other points, some other person's point of view on it. And then, I mean, what did the Pythons do? The Python had one rule. They all had a laugh at it. And these were very, very different people, even though they had all gone to Oxbridge, you know, if they didn't laugh at it. And there were fights, there were physical fights, but you cannot convince somebody something's funny. It has to be funny. And so their rule was, if we don't all laugh, then we don't do it. And that seemed to work well for them.
That's good advice. Thank you, Steve. I'm just going to go over to Amit, who's had his hand up for quite some time. So do go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Pleasure to talk to you, Steve. Just a quick question. You know, earlier on in the beginning of the seminar, you mentioned something about the protagonist not being aware of something. And the first thing that popped into my head was 40-Year-Old Virgin, where he's aware that he's not no stallion in the sack, and he's just sort of given up on you know, finding that person. And
but,
so have I got something wrong? What is it that
I'm going to push back on that, because the very first scene, he gets up, he's got this huge erection. Does he go, oh my God, another day without human contact? No, he just pees as best he can. He kind of leans over and tries to put himself in the right, you know, geometric position.
Yeah.
And then he makes the world's best and loneliest omelet.
Breakfast, yeah.
And then he's totally content as far as he knows. We in the audience can see, oh, this guy needs something. But
you don't think he knows at the back of his mind, subconsciously thinking, do you know what, I'm going to give up on pursuing a woman?
Well, he says he respects women so much he has nothing to do with them. But if you look at his actions up until the poker game, nothing he does is burdened by the wound.
Yeah.
Michael Haig is a great friend of mine, and he originated the term the wound. But you know, we all have a wound, and how much of that, how much of the wound are we carrying when we're eating our fish and chips? Very little. I mean, if our character is so reflective and so interior, you're writing a drama. He's not aware of it. And if he was aware of it, wouldn't he do something about it? He does nothing about it. So that your character is, I mean, in fact, one of the tools and hidden tools of comedy is the idea of the non-hero. A non-hero isn't the fool, isn't the stupidest person in the world. Simply somebody who doesn't have all the skills and tools with which to win. I mean, in fact, some of the worst comedies are those that have us think, oh, I'm the dumbest person in the world. I mean, something, my feeling is you don't have to work that hard to be dumb. You are dumb. We are dumb. I mean, all of us, we're not perfect. We don't have to pretend to be imperfect. That's just another mask. When I see a late Jerry Lewis in which he's pretending to be this idiot, whereas I know that he thinks he's a genius, I'm totally lost because there's no truth there. So a non-hero is somebody who simply lacks some, if not all, the essential skills and tools with which to win. Not all the tools, but most. And so one of the basic tools is knowing. The more your character knows, the less comic it is, because the more they're aware, then why would they be doing that stupid stuff? Have you seen There's Something About Mary? Okay, there's a scene in Something About Mary where Chris Elliott gives him the bad advice to masturbate before the date, because if you go out and you haven't masturbated, that's like you're going out with a loaded gun, right? So he masturbates and then he tries to clean up and he can't find it. And then the knock at the door, and Cameron Diaz is there. And so he goes to the door. Now Peter Farrelly, Bobby Farrelly, I mean, wrote this scene years before, and he put it in a drawer because how could I ever put this in a movie? And then they're working on There's Something About Mary, and he goes, oh, I can put it in the movie. So in the original scene, he goes to the door and she opens it up and she goes, oh my God, what's that? And Peter says, and he goes to Peter and says, I got it, I worked it out. And Peter says, why would she know that? Why is that the first thing she says? So he goes back and he changes it, and he opens the door and he says, looking good. And so she takes a couple of beats and she goes, what is that? And he goes, oh my God. And he cleans it off. That was in the next draft. Then Peter said, if he knew where it was, why didn't he clean it up before? Why did he know exactly where the stuff was? So if you go back to that scene and watch it, it's a classic example of what characters know and what they don't know, beat by beat, moment by moment. So the comedy doesn't come from, oh, look, I've got splooge on my ear. It comes from, what does he know and what does he not know? And when she says, is that hair gel? No, he goes like, on your ear, and he goes to the wrong ear. And then she says, no, your other ear. And then he doesn't do anything, because that's the moment he knows, oh my God, I know it's on my ear. And he's frozen. And then she says, is that hair gel? And he goes, his first thought is, no, it's not. It's something disgusting. And he goes, yeah. And so in one of the last drafts, but not the last draft, she says, is that hair gel? And he takes it off. He puts it in his own hair. He says, oh, yeah, it's hair gel. And Peter said, why the fuck would he do that? Why the fuck would he put that stuff on his own hair knowing what it is? And Bobby went, oh, yeah. And so they rewrote the scene. So she goes, is that hair gel? And he goes, yeah. And so she grabs it, puts it in her own hair. He goes, because he doesn't know how to stop her. And then the next scene, they're having a talk. And then you see that the hair has gotten all hard, because after they wrote the scene, they came back the next day and they went, that stuff gets hard, doesn't it? And that's where, so beat by beat, moment by moment, it's what your characters know, and more importantly, what they don't know. Because the more they know, the less comic it is. The more your characters are, oh my God, those are dramatic moments. Oh my God, I've been an asshole here.
So the don't know can be a lot of things inside the whole movie, not just the main element of. Yeah,
I mean, no one doesn't know everything.
No, but just little things that they're not aware of.
I mean, let me just put it in because comedy tells the truth, and specifically comedy tells the truth about people. So what's true about us all is that we don't know stuff, right? So, for all we know, there's a meteor heading straight for us. I mean, in Denver a couple of months ago, a literal jet engine fell into a suburb. So this happens, right? So for all we know, there's a jet engine above where are you, by the way? I mean,
I'm in London.
okay, so for all we know, there's a jet flying over London and it's lost its engine and it's dropping to the ground. What street are you
on? Lessingham.
Okay, it's dropping on Lessingham and it's going to crash through the building and kill poor Amit. We feel bad for Amit, right? Okay, so Amit, let me ask you a couple of questions. Do you hope it doesn't happen?
Well, I hope that something doesn't fall on my head.
Do you hope you don't get crushed by a big? I'm just asking. Do you hope you don't get crushed by a big jet engine?
Yes.
How's your writing going?
What's your guess? Are you guess you're going to be crushed by a big jet engine?
Yeah, I'm going to be flattened.
No, but what's your real guess?
What, whether it's going to happen or not? Or?
Yeah, what's your guess?
Sorry, I don't understand.
Do you guess you hope it doesn't happen? Do you guess it's going to happen?
No.
No. Are you 100% sure it's not going to happen? 100%.
Yeah.
You're 100% sure it's not going to happen?
99.99%, yeah.
99.9, but you're not 100% sure.
No,
we
nothing.
live every 5 seconds of our lives in hopes and guesses. We hope it doesn't happen. We guess it won't, but we're not sure. You know who's sure? Characters in dramas, characters on soap operas. They're sure about everything. You know, Jennie says she's going to break up with me, and I'm going to go for Amit, right? Because I could be hurt, but I'm not surprised, right? But if Jennie says, Steve, I'm breaking up with you, I could go before dinner because hopefully I can get one more meal out of it. So characters in comedies don't know. And the more you have your characters know, the more you're diluting and diminishing the comic elements in the script. The more they don't know, the better, because then you have the opportunity to have characters discover. The most important moments in a comedy are when they discover something. First moments, primal moments. And I can give you a dozen examples of that. It's not like they can never know. In Big, Tom Hanks wakes up, he's 30 years old. He walks into the bathroom, he looks in the mirror. That's strange. He looks in the back, maybe the mirror's broken. He puts water into his eyes. And then he feels his stubble and he, oh my God. And only after that, and his mom says, are you okay? Does he go to the mirror and go, what's going on? He's discovering that. Whereas in 17 Again, which is not a good movie, Matthew Perry is going through a midlife crisis, and a curse is given to him, and he walks up to and gets into a shower, and then while he's in the shower, he looks in the mirror in the shower, because it's always a good idea to put a mirror in a shower, right? He looks in the mirror and he sees Zac Efron, and he goes, ah! Because, oh my God, I'm Zac Efron. And if Peter Farrelly were around, he would have said, how does he know? Was he expecting to see Zac Efron in the mirror? Wouldn't he be at least confused? So I mean, there's a lot of tools and hidden tools. There's not knowing, there's worldview, the idea that your characters see the world in a particular way, and that affects their behavior. So knowing is so black and white. But if you see the world as a friendly place, and you go to what's a big train station in London?
Waterloo.
Okay, you go to Waterloo, and I'm from a small town in America. And I trust people. I give a bag to somebody in Waterloo Station, say, could you look after it for me? And because I see the world as a friendly place. And I turn my back, I go back, the guy's gone. Do I know that I've been robbed? But if I see the world as a friendly place, maybe I think, well, maybe he had to make a phone call. And then I'll wait. And then I'll wait. And then I'll wait. And after some time, I might think, I hope he's okay. Because, it's who your character is depends on how they see the world. Whereas if I'm from Manchester, and I see everybody in London is a thief, and I put my bag down and turn away, the bag's gone. I don't get angry. I'm vindicated. I knew it. Fucking London. Because who your characters are depends upon how they see the world, and how they see the world affects their behavior, as opposed to in acting class, if somebody says, if somebody says, I'm robbing you, I've been robbed, black and white, but people aren't black and white. People see the world in very different ways.
Thank you so much.
Steve, we've got another question from Barbara, which is about somebody else's book, but it's about a book called The 8 Characters of Comedy, which is for actors and writers. Do you know
Barbara, do you really like it?
I find it interesting from the point of view, I've never thought of thinking about comedy in that way, because I have never done any acting or I've grown up in Germany. It's not part of our education.
Because in Germany, you don't have different kind of characters?
You do, but I haven't got any acting.
Okay.
Acting.
Well,
so, and I've been looking at this story that I want to tell, and I've been mulling it over, which characteristics can I give this person to fit into that framework?
I appreciate the fact you like it. My opinion is, I think it's simplistic to the point of not being very helpful. If you want to think about characters in comedy, go back to the Commedia, where they created a whole theater form where the situation changes, but the characters stayed the same. And you could tell every story with those characters. I mean, you can make up your own kind of character. The characters that he has in that book are kind of stereotypical and could be helpful, but there are a lot of ways to slice and dice characters. Somebody once said that all his characters are the characters from The Wizard of Oz. Somebody's the Dorothy, somebody's the Tin Man, somebody's the Scarecrow, somebody's the Cowardly Lion. Another person talks about, well, this is my Tigger, the Winnie the Pooh in the 100-Acre Wood. This is my Tigger, this is my Eeyore. If you look at Seinfeld, Kramer's a Tigger, right? He's always going somewhere. And George is an Eeyore. Oh boy, things are not going to work out. So my feeling is when you're thinking about the characters in your story, rather than applying something generic to them, you want to apply something specific to them. And if they're not alive to you right away, then use your own experience. This guy's like my Uncle Helmut. And the thing is that you know exactly who Uncle Helmut is. You know how he walks, you know how he talks, you know how he would react to things. This character, even though this character is a 14-year-old boy, he's like my mother. My mother was, and the more specific you can make it, the more universal it will come out. So I would not worry so much about using those particular slices of humanity as much as the sense that if you have a narrative, you don't need 3 best friends. You need 1 best friend. You don't need 4 mentors. You need 1 mentor. You need 1 blocking character. In my slicing and dicing, I say, like there's somebody is an innocent. Maybe somebody's a fool. Maybe somebody's a object of desire, a magical object of desire. In a romantic comedy, usually if the girl's a protagonist, the man is the magical object of desire. If the protagonist is a guy, like in Albert Brooks in Defending Your Life, Meryl Streep is the magical object of desire. And in that narrative, she doesn't have any obligation to be funny because you have people being funny around her where she's the magical object of desire. What I find is that in almost every comedy, you need a trickster. Now, the trickster doesn't have to be the protagonist, but there has to be a character who's comfortable with drawing outside the lines, with breaking the rules, somebody who can move the story along in a trickster kind of a way. In Groundhog Day, Bill Murray's the trickster, but in Big, Tom Hanks isn't the trickster. Tom Hanks's friend who steals money from his parents in order to rent a flop house, a room in a flop house for Tom Hanks to spend 30 days while they figure out where the magical fortune-telling machine is. He's the trickster. So you can create your own archetypes. And an archetype isn't a stereotype. An archetype is just a slice of universal behavior that you can apply to one character. And it's useful because have you ever seen the sitcom Friends?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody comes in and says something stupid. Who's that character?
The blonde girl with long hair.
Okay, she would be Dippy. That's Phoebe. But somebody
Phoebe,
says, a guy says something stupid. Who's that character?
Chandler.
No, well, I would say Chandler.
Oh, Joey.
Joey. Chandler is going to say the wisecrack, and Ross is going to be the schlub. And you see how clearly defined those characters are, and yet they're not limited by those definitions, because the whole joy of Friends is how they often subvert those expectations.
Okay, so if you think of, can I just take the question further? If you think of the archetypes, do any of the archetypes work best as the protagonist for you?
No, it depends on what the story is.
Okay.
I mean,
so you can
think of Bill Murray. He's the classic trickster at Groundhog Day. But then think of Steve Carell. He's the classic innocent and slightly the fool in 40-Year-Old Virgin. So it really depends on what story you're telling.
Are you saying that the trickster, generally speaking, needs a straight guy to play off?
Well, that's a whole other tool, the idea of straight line and wavy line, the idea that rather than thinking about a funny guy and somebody just throwing straight lines at him, you often have situations in which one character is creating a problem or blind to a problem, the other character is struggling with the problem. So oftentimes your trickster is tricking somebody who's blind to the problem, or you could switch that around and have somebody being crazy or insane, and your other characters trying to struggle with that problem. One of the things that we say is that you can't have Mork without Mindy. If you remember the old Mork and Mindy series, if you're going to have a crazy character, you need a human character to balance that out. It's all in this book. It's all in this book.
Read the books.
On my reading list.
I have a small complaint, Steve.
What was that?
I have a small complaint.
Oh my God. Okay, what?
You cost me $58 and an arrest warrant from the library. I had your book out from the library. I loved it. I kept renewing it and studying it. And it wound up at some friend's house when I was over there, and whoever picked it up never gave it back.
It's fucking $27.
Right. Plus the fines and the blood.
Buy from Amazon. I get a couple of pennies. Right. Jesus Christ.
Eventually I did.
And you can win copies just by being here today.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. There you go. Well, I'm very sorry that you are a thief and you robbed a library of my book.
And then you blame Steve for it.
I definitely apologize for that.
Give me big time. But it's funny, every time somebody mentions your book, I'm like, it's great. And I always think like, yeah, now where's that copy? Who took it?
Who took it?
And they probably wrote the funnier movie now that is competing with my movie, right.
I think Greg's got a question that he wanted to ask. Greg?
Yes, hi Steve. Cancel culture. Cancel culture, Steve.
What about cancel culture?
How do you navigate? How does a comedian and a writer navigate now with all the sensitivities like Dave Chappelle and all the kind of sensitivities now around humor and what you can say?
I have two thoughts about that. I don't know if I don't know how sincere Dave Chappelle is with his thoughts about trans. I don't. But if they're his thoughts, he's a comedian. He has the obligation to share them. That's his job. And if I'm upset by that, that's okay. I mean, think of George Carlin and the 7 words you can't say on television. Now it's like, what do you mean? We've got more than 7 words and we can say anything we want on Netflix. But so I like what Ricky Gervais says about cancel culture. Fuck them.
Well, I thought that's what you were going to say with the 2 words.
These are my jokes, and if you don't like them, fuck you. You know, but my other thought about cancel culture, and the reason I don't know if Dave Chappelle's coming from a real place, is don't punch down. You know, comedy is there to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So if you're punching down, is that really your target in comedy? Is that really what you want to focus on? I mean, when you have Trump and Boris Johnson and vax deniers and insurrectionists and QAnon, you're really going to punch down on people who are trans? Now, if you're going to say anything about trans, you got to talk about yourself. You can't make fun of them. You can make comment about how you don't get it, because that's honest. It's like, I don't get it. But you know, I stopped watching Bill Maher simply because he's become the guy who says, get off my lawn. You know, the old guys, get off my lawn. And his point is that if everybody doesn't have his opinion, they're an idiot. Whereas your job as a comedian is to question your own thoughts, is to go, how fucked up am I? Yeah. It's so you can make fun of your own confusion. I mean, if you're going to make fun of anybody, start with yourself. You know, draw a concentric circle, starting with yourself and then going outwards, as opposed to talking about a group that you know nothing about. And if you want to talk about how you know nothing about it, that's okay. As opposed to making comments that, that where your target is unclear, and unclear why you're targeting that. So, it's true that there are, people, trigger warnings and people are oversensitive, but fuck them. If you're a comedian, your job is to approach the line and then cross it, as George Carlin said. But you're not trying to do harm while you do it.
I was thinking of one of the ways to try and balance it, because I mean, Elliot knows this. I've been playing with a character, and it started about 15 years ago with a little sketch I did of a chef who is on a pilot, and he's so un-PC because he doesn't understand cultural, doesn't understand the swear language, things like that. So he gets kicked off the pilot, actually gets kind of ceremoniously removed, and ends up on YouTube many years later. This started with me playing with this character, and then my daughter started working at McDonald's, so I put her hat on, put my thing on, and started basically offending shitty food and fast food, and if you really want good food, come to my chef school. So it started like that. I've been sending Elliot some of these, and he thinks, yeah, you should go with it. And then I'm terrified because he offends everyone pretty much. Well, I thought maybe the twist of that is that you start to see his human side, why he might have these slightly offensive opinions.
You have to be careful, but you also have to know what you're doing. I mean, for instance, Norman Lear is a liberal, but his father was this horrible guy. So when he adapted Till Death Us Do Part, he didn't just say, like, as Barbara's thinking, what character should I use? He used his father. His father used to call his wife dingbat. Norman Lear's father used to insult everybody. He once said that Norman Lear was the laziest white guy on earth, which is, I think, a line or a paraphrase of a line that ended up on All in the Family.
Yeah.
His goal was to make fun of that conservative mindset. But when he put it out there back in the 70s, a lot of conservatives thought he was parroting what they wanted to say. He was their champion. So you don't have to soften it. You just have to know who you're making fun of. Now, if you want to make sure that the audience knows what your point of view is, have another character there. Another character who, like your co-chef, who is, on the one hand, wanting to do this YouTube video, on the other hand, is appalled by what you said, but on the other hand, doesn't know how to say it. You know, so if your other character says, don't say stuff like that, you haven't done a straight line, wavy line dynamic. If your other character goes, oh, well, but I think even Mexicans can make this dish, because, you know, he doesn't know how to deal with your character's misogyny and bigotry. So if you want to make clear what your point of view is, you might want to have another character reacting to it.
Well, I had my idea through was that his daughter, who's more savvy with the way things go, you know, in these times, would be
except
the balancer. She would
I'm
be
just
the
saying
one
that
pointing out.
you want to be careful about putting a know-it-all character in there,
Right?
because that's the death of comedy. You know, the dad is horrible and the daughter knows exactly what to say. You want a character who's confused and doesn't know how to respond. Tries to say the right thing but doesn't know how. It is a better approach than having somebody there who is going to tell the audience, no, this is the approved way of thinking.
Well, I think she just takes offense and he doesn't understand why and pushes back, and then there's a conflict between them until he finally starts to reveal his, you know, probably some of his own prejudices because of his background, his culture, and she's, you know, getting through to him on some levels to the point where he finally starts to get it. You see a sort of person that goes through this transition of, you know, not getting it. She's just gently pointing out that really you can't say that kind of thing, and he doesn't understand why. And eventually he starts to kind of go through a metamorphosis of, he does get it to the point where he
does he do this all in one? Does he do this all in one video?
No, this would be a sequence of him posting videos that she happens to see and other people see. And then eventually when he's gone through this you know, he actually starts to become successful and gets his own little show. So at that point, he's made the transformation from.
So what you're describing is a character, and the daughter's character has to be something that she doesn't know immediately, but figures out a way of dealing with him. So as opposed to simply from the get-go saying, no, Dad, you're wrong.
Yeah, no, they're fighting. In fact, she, you know, he thinks he knows it all, and he's, you know, he's kind of as offensive to her initially until he slowly starts to get, you know, he starts to get through to him on some level. He starts to get the nuances of what he's doing, and also something's got to come in. I think I thought the balancer would be that if you see him as a human who has flaws, who has a background that caused him to maybe not be so PC, let's say, our understanding about some of the people he's talking about, that you might see him as more human and vulnerable, that you see his vulnerabilities coming out.
Without knowing the specifics, it's hard for me to, you know, debate this with you. I can just tell you that Mel Brooks once said, your character is twitchy not because they left the dry cleaner's tag in the back of the shirt, meaning be careful about justifying and explaining too much away.
Mm-hmm.
You got a little bit of background into Archie Bunker in season 3 or season 2 when he's stuck in the meat locker with Meathead. But until then, he was just kind of an asshole. You can hint at that, but but without specifics. You're right, and I don't know.
If I can just jump in, Steve, I've been fortunate enough to see a few of Greg's sketches. Basically, it's Archie Bunker doing a gourmet cooking show.
Okay,
and that's the thing, and I think it's great. But he's worried about cancel culture.
Then it's great. Then don't worry about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't worry about it, and have fun with it. I mean, because my critiquing it is like as if I'm, giving you a physical over Zoom. No, cough now. No, hold your groin and cough. Okay, you don't have tuberculosis. I'm going to not do a great job of it. Could you give us an example of a great comedy script that didn't work for you on screen? I don't know that I can. I actually do. There's a group called Storyboard here in LA, and what they do is they get drafts of scripts before they're released as films, and they're usually earlier drafts or early drafts. And I've never read one that I've thought, boy, that's great, and then it sucks. Usually I'm reading a draft and I'm saying, boy, they have a lot of problems. And then when the movie opens up, they haven't solved all of them. So I'm reading a script right now called Vengeance by BJ Novak that I'm liking a lot. So if this movie sucks when it appears, it's only in theaters July 29th. That will be my first example of it's great. It's this Brooklyn hipster who sleeps around, and a girl that he basically just calls up for 3 a.m. booty calls dies in Texas, but everybody in her Texas family thinks that they were about to be married. And so he goes to her funeral because he's kind of shamed into it. And he begins like an investigation on how she died. And it's all about how she thought he was the love of her life. And he was like, you up? that was the extent of their relationship. And I find, and one of the things I like about it is, and you should aspire to this too, how little writing there is on the page, how much white there is on the page. You don't, comedy is brevity, and certainly in your first couple of drafts, it's going to be long, but when you get it closer and closer, you're not helped by overwriting. And best comic dialogue is spare. So if Vengeance sucks, that would be my first example of a really funny script that they fucked up. But listen, it's hard to do something well. It's, between the idea and the execution, there's so many ways that things can go wrong.
I was just asking also from the perspective of casting, and sometimes.
Yeah, what if Casablanca starred Ronald Reagan? That's the first example of, oh my God, they were so lucky. What if The Godfather, rather than having Al Pacino, what if they got Troy Donahue, or one of the people that they wanted to cast as opposed to Al Pacino? It's like, it's amazing that anything good ever happens, because there's so many ways that things can go badly, which is why people do stand-up, because then if it sucks, it's you. You can't blame anybody else. So no, usually if a movie isn't good, you can see in the script why it's not working. would a comical name not be an advantage to portray your character? Yes. Avoid the Walter Crankcase school of comedy. In other words, Boris My Johnson. You know, it's like if you want to avoid the low-hanging fruit, you know, give them the name of your uncle, Uncle Helmut. That's as good a name as anything else. Mickey Rooney is the Godfather. Yes, that would be great. Was Sylvester Stallone considered for Superman?
He was. He
Oh, wow.
he auditioned for the part.
Lois, I'm here to save you. So I'm not sure how well that would go. Okay, this is the time when I'm going to tell you that I just don't spout out for free, that I do this for a living. Please, not only buy my books, but please go to my website, kaplancomedy.com, and sign up for the mailing list, in which we will barrage you with, I have a monthly or bi-monthly, or whenever I get the feeling, newsletter. We answer your comedy questions there. I also do several Zoom classes. We have a Zoom course that's coming up starting October 8th. It's a 4-week Zoom course. It's interactive like this, with writing assignments, and that's called Create and Write Your Comic Screenplay. We're going to take one of your premises and we're going to walk you through from premise to extended premise to 1-page to a 5-page treatment, so that you're ready to go write a script. And that's 4 sessions, Zoom sessions, plus a one-on-one Zoom consultation when you finished your 5-page treatment, that will go over your treatment and tell you where to go and what your pitfalls might be and what the potentials might be. And hopefully one day when the pandemic ends, I will be back in London at Rain Dance. Because what could be better than that? Sharing a basement together for 2 days.
Steve, thank you so much. You've been so generous.
Or in Toronto, Randall.
Thank you. Yeah, wherever. Steve, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing so much of your wisdom with us. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm
going to also put my email address.
Brilliant. Thanks.
I should spell comedy correctly. Okay, that's my email address. I'm on Twitter, and I'm available for bar mitzvahs, openings. I like the color blue. I like long walks on the beach. I'm married, but not a fanatic about it. So, okay. Well, this has been fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Hey, thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, you told me that I could hang around for the rest of the session. Not getting rid of me that easily.
You definitely can hang around. For anybody who wants to hang around, hang around.
Hey, Steve, I got to run, but great to see you again. And I can't wait to get you back to London. And that's how you met Jennie, because she came to one of your classes in
right. Well,
2019 or whenever.
We'll make it happen, Elliot.
Yeah, cool, great.
And Rain Dance Toronto.
And
Make it
Toronto.
happen.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Take care, Elliot.
Thanks, Jennie. Thanks, Randall. Give me a call, Randall, sometime.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Randall. Thank you,
Take care,
Jennie.
Steve.
This was great.
Thank you.
All the best.
Bye, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you a lot.
Oh, that was a good session.
That was fun.
I'm also going to drop off.
Oh,
Well, in your defense, you've been here for 2 hours, Swati, or 3.5 now. But
I know. Enjoy the rest of the evening, Swati.
You too.
Take care. Bye. Bye.
I found that quite interesting because what it is, I don't know if I'm free to talk at the moment for a few seconds.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop recording actually.
Oh, now, oh God, now Amit's going to say just about anything.